So back to my step-up lessons, you can see that we've developed some sort of really basic lessons where we say this is an example of teaching students how to combine the topic with an interesting fact, right? So so here we've got pill bugs and dark brown head. Now we want to turn this into a sentence, and it might be a topic sentence, but we would say, all right, have them practice this, and oh, let's see. It's not working for me. Okay, we have our little guy here, who's our little Einstein guy on the construction site, and he's telling us the answers next. And then pill bugs have a dark brown head. So we have students practice writing sentences from their notes. So so they will you know, do several exercises like this to sort of develop a complete sentence from their notes. Another thing that we can have them do is teach them how to combine related facts. So here's another step-up lesson where we've got Mississippi River is the topic, and we've got two facts. It covers 2,350 miles, and it goes from Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. So I want to combine these into a single sentence. The Mississippi River covers 2,350 miles and goes from Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. So, so you can see that we have these sort of step-up lessons. We also teach students that sometimes if they're combining related facts, they have to choose which facts are they going to include. So here's an example where we've got 3 facts, and I asked the students to combine 2 of them. So they need to read through and choose which ones to combine. So as we're looking here, it says, well, it says goes from Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico. It says it's more than 1.5 miles wide in some places, and then 400 feet deep in some places. Well, let's see. But two of them talk about how wide or deep they are, which sort of tells you how big it is. It goes from Minnesota to the Gulf of Mexico is also sort of how big it is, but it's a little bit different than the other. So I think I'm going to choose, you know, more than 1.5 miles wide and 400 feet deep, and I'm going to go ahead and write a sentence that says it's more than 1.5 miles. Well, you can see I made a mistake here, which you know, is also what I might say is, man, I made a mistake. How can I fix that? I've got to say it's more than 1.5 miles wide and 400 feet deep in some places. So I might need to write the word wide in there. And so so anyway, so you can see that sometimes it's okay to make mistakes. I have to remember this and fix this in this presentation for the students so that they don't learn the mistake. But anyway, the point is that we've got these step-up lessons for the students, which was a great question. I'm going to show another example here about compare contrast, and I want to share this because I want to show, you know, how a different text structure might work. I'm not going to share all the text structures, but I want to share, you know, a couple here for you. So, and another example is compare contrast, and you can see we've got this icon here, and you know, we review the compare contrast definition. So the author's intent is to tell us about how 2 things are the same and different. And the icon here represents, you know, it's 2 hands holding up 2 shapes. And those shapes might have some similarities and differences. And I've asked kids, I said, what's similar about the shapes and what's different about them? And so some kids will say different colors, and I'm like, that's absolutely right. They're, you know, one's black and one's white. They will say that they're about the same size. And they'll say that, oh, well, they both have at least one flat side to it, which I thought was really great, a really great one. And so anyway, you know, you can see that we talk about the similarities and differences, and we said that's the point of compare and contrast, is talking about these similarities and differences. All right, so we want to use an information frame to write compare contrast, and so you can see that we've got another information frame here. That says pioneers have to choose between horses and oxen. Now this frame is slightly different. Instead of just having a list of characteristics and facts, have similarities and differences. So capable of pulling wagons, and some differences are speed, strength, and cost. And so I have some choices that are different choices than when I was writing a simple description. And now I can sort of organize my differences and similarities in a variety of ways. So one thing I could do is I could group all the similarities and differences. So when I have a choice there, I could either group all the similarities together and then write about all of them, and then I can write about all of the differences, or I could write about all the differences first and then write about the similarities, or I could mix them, and I could say, well, you know, sometimes the similarities and differences are related, so I might say first similarity and then a related difference, and then the second similarity and then a related difference, and then the third similarity and a related difference, etc. So we teach students that you might organize compare contrast in different ways based on the information. We review the POW strategy, and then ask them to open their workbook to the appropriate page. Whoops, and well, this isn't, you can see that my checklist is not showing up. So, oh, I'm sorry. Sorry, we're going to show a step-up lesson first here. I got ahead of myself. So what I might do is I've got sometimes information in parentheses in compare contrast, and when I have information parentheses, sometimes it's what I'm doing here is sort of, again, helping give kids information, but not having them have to read a lot. So I've got these differences: speed, and it says horses faster makes trips shorter. And then strength is a difference. Oxen are stronger, could pull heavier loads. So I need to teach kids how to use the information in parentheses if we've got information in parentheses. So what I'm going to show them is that, I'm going to write about speed, and I can say one difference was speed. Horses move faster than oxen, making the trip shorter. And so you can see that I'm using the information that is in parentheses, and I'm sort of like, again, using a transition here. One difference was speed, and then I write about that difference. And so you can do that with the parentheses. And so we teach kids in a step-up lesson like that. So another difference was strength. Oxen were stronger and could pull heavier loads. So so we do a little step-up lesson. And then another step-up lesson that we have is, or another activity that we do is, we have, you can see on the left here, the POW strategy isn't available. So we ask them to fill this in. It's blank in their workbook, and we ask them to fill in the parts of the POW strategy. What do you need to do first? Well, and then they have to pick their idea, organize, and then write. And so they have to fill in the POW strategy to help them remember and memorize what they're supposed to do as they're writing. The first thing we need to do is pick our topic. In this case, pioneers choose between horses and oxen is our topic. We follow the same strategy with compare contrast as we did with simple description. The next thing that we need to do is pick our structure. And I told you that we're learning about compare contrast today. So we'll go ahead and circle the CC for compare contrast. And now I'm going to choose an order. So, just like with simple description, I want to read through my the information that I have here, and then decide on what's the appropriate order. So it says here, they're similarities, they're capable of pulling wagons. So both animals, horses and oxen, are capable of pulling the wagons, and pioneers have to choose between them, presumably to pull the wagons, right? And then, all right, so differences are speed, strength, and cost. Horses are faster, oxen are stronger, and horses are more expensive. So let's see. Well, all of those differences sort of go together, but I might want to start with the similarities first. So I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 next to they're capable of pulling wagons. And then, I kind of like the order here, speed, strength, and then cost. I like sort of that the horses are faster and then the oxen are stronger, but horses are more expensive. So it sort of shows there are two differences. One has an advantage for horses and the other has an advantage for oxen, but then there's a disadvantage for horses that they're more expensive. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to leave those in the same order. And so we can teach students that they don't always have to change the order of the information, but they do need to think it through. And then the next thing that they need to do is write. And you can see that I sort of just teach them to write in the same way. And in this case, the paper here, gosh, isn't that, it was meant to be lined in the appropriate way. So I apologize again. All right, so we review, and we review in the same way, where we say, the topic. In this case, do I mention the two things that they're comparing and contrasting? horses and oxen. Do I alternate or group my facts? So it's a slightly different than the simple description. So here, did I alternate or choose my facts? Did I include signal words, transition, capitals, and did my sentences make sense? They check off that they reviewed, and then I wanted to share with you what we do with the bricks. And so this is sort of a progress monitoring piece. So I mentioned that students get the bricks for completing different lessons. So as they finish their compare contrast, you can see each row of each column represents one essay that they've written. And we start with the modeling, so that we even include the modeling essay. So you can see that at this point they've completed 5 essays, and they just completed their 6th. And so they go ahead and they add the bricks in to show that they've completed. They're monitoring their progress. They've got all the parts that they needed to include. So they finished this. And so what we do then is we share with them sort of our tower, and our little Einstein character comes back, and he's saying, oh yeah, we finished compare contrast. Now we've learned compare contrast. Now we have our character comes out for each of the text structures. We share this on the PowerPoint. In one of them, he says, oh yeah. Another, he says, let's party. Another one, he says, cake time. And we actually, he's up on the 4th floor, so there's like a cake with rockets under it that shoots up. And the kids loved this, right? They always wanted to find out what the Einstein character was going to do next. And so this is just a small motivation piece that we built into the instruction. And I wanted to share it because I wanted to say that sometimes we not only do we progress monitor, but we need to sort of give the kids a pat on the back for learning stuff, and do some stuff that sort of motivates them. And it doesn't have to be big, right? Sometimes it could be as small as showing a character doing something new, right? And the kids really love this. In fact, one student was absent on a day that we taught this in a study, and he came in and he was asking all the kids, what did he do last time? Can you show me what he did? And so they were really excited about it. So it keeps them motivated and keeps them interested in the learning. I wanted to share with you some examples from the writing that we've seen. So here we did in one study we had pre-post passages on sequence. So this is this is a simple description on the Hubble Space Telescope. So here's a student, Carol's pretest. She just wrote fact, fact, and fact because ideas not orbit our home. Fact because I think it is a rocket site. So she writes these facts, but the facts don't all come from the Hubble Space Telescope, right? And so we asked them to use the information to write about the Hubble Space Telescope, but she writes about different facts. At the post-test, you can see her writing has changed. The Hubble Space Telescope was launched in 1990. It is not on Earth, it orbits in space. It's as long and as large as a school bus. It weighs as much as 2 full-grown elephants. The telescope takes digital pictures of outer space. It uses large mirror and to collect light for pictures. And you can see that this passage, there aren't really transition words in here yet, but she does use 1990, so she's telling us a little bit about the facts. She's using complete sentences. She's using capital letters and periods, and she's making sort of a cohesive passage. Here's another example. This is a formation of a tsunami, and I'll just share this as Josue's pretest, and he said tsunamis are dangerous. They can grow up to 10 to 30 feet tall, and they are formed by earthquakes, volcanoes, eruption, or meteorite. And so this is a good question. These are struggling 4th grade writers. So they're 4th grade. So you can see that student was trying to write a pretty good cohesive passage, really 2 sentences, not using punctuation necessarily, and although there's a comma here, and sort of still having some difficulty. Post-test, Josue writes, tell you about how a tsunami is formed. First, the seafloor moves due to an earthquake, volcanic eruption, or meteorite. Then, water deep in the ocean moves. It travels from deep sea to land. The tsunami grows in wave height as it gets closer to land. Finally, the wave hits land. The wave could be 10 to 30 feet tall. And so, James, I agree. This is a huge improvement, right? So the things that we're noticing here. Well, let's see. What do you notice that's different in Josue's post-test here? What are some of the things that you're seeing Josue start to do? Has a nice opening, using complete sentences, transition words to connect ideas, punctuation and capitalization. There's a hook. There are these transitions. Much better organized, right? And so, it was nice because we could focus on those kind of skills for Josue, right? And so we didn't. And the thing is we didn't have to spend time reading a lot of books about tsunamis first, right? And the point, we weren't teaching him necessarily about tsunamis. We could, and maybe he learned something about tsunamis from just writing this passage. But we weren't. Our focus was how to write a nice sequence of events, right? So you can see we've got first, then, finally, right? And so there's this sequence of events that happens, with the tsunami. So there's a little bit of description here and that sequence. And so doing this by giving the information, we allowed Josue to focus his attention on learning about the features of a sequence text and how to include some of these features. So now I want to talk a little bit about like what's next. And so you notice that I taught simple description and compare contrast, and we taught sequence, and all of these are taught in isolation. However, sometimes when we read information text, authors will sometimes use more than one text structure. I'm going to give you an example of that. And so here's a text that we sometimes share with our students with multiple text structures. And you can see this is on the power of wind. And in this first paragraph in the power of wind, it says people have been using the power of wind for many years. Windmills are one way people use wind. And it tells us a little bit about windmills here. So some facts. And so that is sort of meant to be a simple description. So it just tells us information about windmills. And then second, we talk about a sequence of events. So how do windmills or wind turbines use, how are they used to produce electricity? To make this happen, first wind pushes on the blades, causing them to spin. The spinning blades generate electricity, all of this stuff. And so it's sort of a sequence of events. And then a problem and solution. So wind turbines are generally considered to be safe. However, they're not always safe for birds. So we've introduced a problem. Birds can be killed as they fly into the spinning blades. To prevent this, people avoid building wind turbines in birds' flight paths, etc. So you can see that sometimes authors will use or fluidly move from one text structure to the next. And so that's the next step, is we want to teach students how to write using multiple text structures. So they might write a passage or combine passages that are on the same topic into a more, a deeper or more elaborate essay that includes multiple paragraphs. I want to say one other thing here is that I want you to be we have to be careful a little bit with text structures. And this is a fun example that we were using some of this with fourth graders, but we had second graders. We wrote a sequence text for them, and we wanted to find out if they could identify, text structures and whether it was, whether it's a sequence text or something else. So we wrote this as a sequence text. This was a doctoral student of mine, and I wrote this. So this is, the first cars were built in 1769. They were powered by steam. Cars powered by steam were not safe, and they often broke down. automakers began using gas engines in their cars in the late 1800s. Although these cars were safer and more reliable, they were more expensive. Henry Ford started the Ford Motor Company then in 1903. His goal was to build cars that many people could afford. The Ford Motor Company was the first to use an assembly line. So we wrote this as a sequence, and we put dates in here to sort of indicate to students that it was a sequence. So we asked second graders about this, and we said, which text structure do you think the author was trying to use, sequence or problem solution? And then tell why you think so. And the student says, sequence, because it says first. And so you can see back here, it says the first car. So the student is looking for a signal word, and they used first, right? So they say, oh, it's got a signal word there. Another student says, well, it's a problem solution because the passage doesn't have order words. So this student was focused on just looking for the order words here and didn't catch the word first and wasn't really thinking about the dates, and so chose problem solution for that reason. Still a third student, though, this was really interesting, checked problem solution, and they said because the first kind of cars were not safe, then the new cars were too expensive, then Ford made good and not too expensive cars. And so I like to show this example because it just goes to show that sometimes we can write a passage that is meant to be a sequence of events, but also includes a problem solution. And this can happen with multiple text structures. So you can write a passage that is describing something, but then also compares it to something else. Or you can write something is meant to be a cause effect, but also has a sequence of events in it, right? And so, so we need to teach kids a little bit about that, and we need to be careful with our examples. So that's another thing to keep in mind as a teacher, is to be careful with the examples that you share with students. So that's about all of my time. I think, I want to take some time for discussion. So I mentioned at the beginning to sort of like think of some notes that stood out to you. Is there something that squared your thinking or practices, and what's still circling in your mind? And so I'm happy to take questions and kind of hear some of the things that you maybe some of your ideas about this approach to teaching writing.
Okay, we have about 20 minutes for questions. So I would like to invite whoever wants to type a question to type it in the chat box, and Michael will be happy to respond.
Yeah. Question that came up that I'm looking back from Ann Koenig says, would you say this program is more geared to Division II? I teach grade 3, which usually has children at K1 and grade 2 levels. I'm not sure my students at K level could read this passage about the power of wind. And that's a challenge, right? So it's always, do our students have enough ability to read passages at this level? So we've developed passages that are more appropriate for younger and older students. I would say that we were really, when we were developing this, we were focused on 4th graders who might be struggling writers and struggling readers. And so we tried to reduce the amount of reading that was required. And we did that by providing the information frames. And so, as we were talking about the passage that was about the power of wind, really we didn't really share. We shared that with some 2nd graders, and they were okay. They were also a little bit higher performing, but that's not something we sort of normally put into the program. Normally we have them writing slightly less challenging passages. In this case, it was a reading test, but I was just using that as a sort of an illustration. I hope that makes sense. But I would say that you need to really think about the level of your students. I think it's an important point. You don't want to use a vocabulary that's too difficult. I'll say that, I'm going to share back, this first passage. sort of when I was looking at arthropods here, when we had kids write about arthropods, this is another sort of scaffold that we have in the program, right? Is that the students didn't have to come up with this vocabulary word arthropods, and they also don't need to spell it, right? It's spelled there for them. And so we've reduced the demands on transcription skills. Also, we've reduced the demands on their working memory by including words like arthropods and exoskeleton. They can just look and sort of cheat, if you will, by spelling it, by just using the word that's already spelled there for them. And so it sort of reduces the cognitive load a little bit, and allows them to kind of focus on the organization instead. So I hope that answers the question there.
Michael, a question we got from Helen is, how long would you teach each section? For example, the compare and contrast.
Absolutely, that's a great question, Helen. What we've done is we want to teach to criterion. We've developed this as sort of a set of lessons, and we've taught it as a set of lessons for research purposes. But I really sort of would like to focus on teaching to criterion. So we might teach it for 5 lessons, maybe we teach it for 7 lessons, depending on what the students need. I always model 1 or 2 before I have the students get into guided practice. So I'm providing the think aloud for them, and then doing the writing, and then we'll have several guided practice examples. And some of those guided practice examples will be things that we do together on a PowerPoint. And so we'll write it together, and they have sort of that workbook page I shared here. Let's see. So when I'm modeling, I have a workbook page where it's just a closed passage. As we get into guided practice, I just have lined paper for them. And so we'll write the passage together, and I give them, we talk through the choices that we need to make, and we will write the passage together, and then we move them toward guided practice. And there, the teacher has to make decisions, right? And you have to sort of take the art of teaching into play. And so you have to think about, what do my students need? Do they need a little bit more help? Do they need a little less help? Can I move them more toward independent practice? And how can I get them to be more independent? And so we might do that with like 2 passages. We maybe use 4 passages. It really depends on the needs of the individual students, if that makes sense. So I hope that answers your question, Helene.
And can you speak a little bit more about teaching with fidelity?
Yes. So that's a great point. One of the things that I didn't share, I mentioned that teaching with fidelity is important, but I didn't really share a fidelity checklist in this presentation. But what we do is we want to make sure that we're going through all of the steps of the instruction in the way that we sort of said that we would for the lesson. So this includes things like the step-up lessons. So as we teach a step-up lesson, or as we go into the lesson, do we, well, I'll just walk through all the things. So do we share the definition and the icon? Do we talk about what the icon represents and what our purpose is as an author? So our author's intent is to tell us about something. They use characteristics or facts to describe it. So we need to do that step with the students, and then talk about what we mean by that, and what this drawing represents, that picture in students' minds. And so we have a checklist that sort of says, did the teacher cover that part of the topic? Do we introduce the strategy? And then do we model this with a think aloud? Showing each of the parts. We have in that checklist, we might say, did we teach them about, in the think aloud, the difference between nouns and pronouns? Did we add in information about transition words and model how to think through using transition words or combining information? And so each of our lessons has a checklist with all of those components in it. And that checklist does 2 things. One, for research purposes, it allows us to see, are teachers able to teach this? Are they able to use the program with fidelity and use it easily? And then have they taught all the parts? If the students aren't learning, part of the reason might be that they haven't the teachers haven't taught all the parts. But also that checklist can just serve, as you're teaching, can serve as a guide and saying, oh, I need to make sure that I'm doing all of these things. And so what I always have our teachers do is read through the fidelity checklist before teaching the lesson, look at all of the lesson slides before they've taught the lesson, and then check off the things that they that are on that fidelity checklist as they teach them. And that helps guide them and make sure that they teach all of these components. Because again, it's difficult to remember all of the things that we need to do as teachers, right? So reducing cognitive load, providing models, planning, teaching the strategy, monitoring students' progress, chunking skills. All of these things are all things that we need to do as teachers. And so so to reduce our own cognitive load, sometimes it's nice to have that checklist of things that we need to, like instructional moves we need to make. And as we make them, we can check off on the checklist that we've completed them. I hope that answers that question.
Michael Joanne is asking, do you have any advice on how to transition to finding their own information to build their own paragraphs?
Yes. So what we've done is, as we've sort of transitioned students out of learning to write these paragraphs, and they've gotten good with it, then we'll give them source text, and we'll teach them to take notes. And so what we do actually is we'll, I mentioned how sometimes graphic organizers are challenging to take notes in, right? And so we've got lessons also that are blank information frames. And the blank information frames will be, it'll have the structure blank, the topic will be blank, and the characteristics and facts will be blank. Or, if it's similarities and differences. So we give them this blank information frame. And so, so then we teach them to read a passage about pill bugs, for example, and then they might put in, oh, I learned that they are arthropods, so they can write in their notes they are arthropods, or have 7 pairs of jointed legs. And so they take notes right in the information frame, just as they've learned, they've learned to use this information frame to guide their writing. So as they take their notes in it, then it will help them write their own passage. And so that's sort of another scaffold that we have. And then they don't have to rely on, graphic organizer that might, graphic organizers are great. So I don't want to sort of say not to use them, but sometimes they can be a little bit challenging. So, and maybe writing in an information frame like this might help them stay organized a little bit more. And, when we have things like similarities and differences, and we have lines under similarities and differences, then they can think about, well, am I writing about a similarity about horses and oxen? What's the note that I want to take there? And then they can put their note about what's the same and what's different on those lines beneath, and then that will help them write. And so that's what we've done is develop some note-taking lessons that sort of mirror, or sort of it sort of allows them to read and then pull the information and then write notes in a way that mirrors these frames that they can then write from. If that makes sense.
Leanne is asking also a question about whether you have a scope and sequence for the informational text structures or build-up of lessons. And a related question also from some of the attendees is whether this program is available to the public and where they can find information or can purchase it if they want to.
Yeah, so the program is, I'm just going to put my email address in the chat. We had it available for free for teachers, and I had it in Box. And so Box is a program that's sort of a cloud-based program, and I was able to provide teachers with a link to it. And our university just moved from Box to Microsoft Teams, and so I don't have it to share at the moment because it moved out of the place I was sharing it from. I just need to figure out how to share the link from Teams. I think I can do this. I can either share it on a cloud. So if you're interested and you like the program, go ahead and email me, and I can, and I'm going to figure out how to share a link, and then you'll have the program with all of the lessons. There is a scope and sequence. We have a instructor's manual, a quick start guide that talks about all of the features of the instruction and how to sort of use it. And we also have our fidelity checklists. So so if you email me, I will send everybody who emails me a link as soon as I can figure out how to make sure that I can share it. I don't want to send a link that doesn't work, so so I can do that. Shelley asked about if this book, Best Practices in Writing Instruction, is the book, and it doesn't have this program in the book, although I do talk about it in one of the chapters in the book. But really, Steve Graham, Charles MacArthur, and I are the editors of that book, and we solicited chapters from a variety of experts in the field around a variety of topics like writing assessment and sentence combining and a lot of different types of strategies. So so that book is a great book. I recommend it, but it's not necessarily related to this text structure intervention.
Any other questions for Dr. Hebert? One question, Michael, is whether the program is appropriate or can be used with struggling writers in upper elementary grades.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? I was looking at the...
If the program is or could be used with struggling writers in upper grades.
Yeah, you know, I think it could be. We've used it primarily with fourth grade writers, but then we did do some single case design work where we worked with a couple of middle school students, so fifth graders, or well, fifth grade is still elementary here, but we worked with some sixth graders and a couple of, so we had a study that was like a couple of fifth graders, a couple of sixth graders, and a couple of seventh graders. And they all benefited from using the program we found in our single case design. Somebody mentioned, I like Leanne's question here, do you want us to put your emails here so you don't have 432 different emails to respond to? And that's, I appreciate that, Leanne. It will be hard to respond to all of the emails. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to take, I would have to copy the email addresses out of the chat. It'll be easier for me to just copy them from my email and just send everybody the link that way. But you're right, it's going to be a little cumbersome. So but that's okay. I can handle it.
Another question, Michael, is do you have a structure that asks students to respond to literature, personal or analytical? Not
yet, no. We really focused on those 5 informational text structures. So description, sequence, cause effect, compare contrast, and problem solution. So so we didn't really get into analyzing or responding to literature yet.
And Dr. McInnes is asking, how critical is the students' verbalization of the concepts as you're teaching them? For example, is verbalizing facilitative for the writing output?
You know, I don't have any hard data on this, so so I'd have to guess on this a little bit. I intuitively I would say yes, that I think that verbalizing the steps, verbalizing the you know, things like, oh, I need to add a transition word here, or one good thing that I can combine the information. If students are verbalizing that, then it shows that they are, it's just sort of another way for them to remember the strategy, to remember the things that they need to do. And I think it will help them, you know, improve the writing, you know, sort of the organization and the quality of the writing overall. That's my guess, although I don't have data from a study, at least not a study that I've done, that sort of compares students verbalizing to not verbalizing. So.
And a final question, Michael, is there a sentence combining section included in this program?
Not in this program. I have step-up lessons where I teach them how to combine information, but it's not necessarily sentence combining because, as you noticed in the notes, there aren't always full sentences there. So they're just sort of combining facts rather than combining sentences. So I could, you know, point you to some resources. Bruce Sadler has a great book on teaching teaching effective sentence writing. And I think that that's a great book for sentence combining. And then he's also got a chapter in the book, Best Practices in Writing Instruction, that is in the chat as well. So so the program doesn't have sentence combining in it, but it does ask kids to combine information.
Thank you, Michael. I think we'll stop here. We'll take a 15 minutes break so that we can stretch a little bit and then come back at 10:25 to get ready for our next presentation with Dr. Steve Graham. Once again, thank you very much, Dr. Hebert. I echo the sentiment and the comments of our teachers here that they feel that this was an amazing presentation. Thank you very much. And I look forward to work with you and have our teachers learn from you to improve their writing practices. So once again, thank you, and thank you everyone. We'll be back at 10:25.
Yeah, thank you again so much for having me, and I hope that the information was useful and that that teachers can use this. So again, I'm happy to share. Thanks again.